The Jeep Wrangler has always been one of the most capable off-road vehicles on the planet, but it had one safety problem that Jeep couldn't seem to solve. In a crash test that no other SUV struggled with, the Wrangler kept tipping onto its side. After years of trying, Jeep finally fixed it for 2026, and the solution is surprisingly simple. First, let's talk about the small overlap crash test. Back in 2012, a safety group called the Insurance Institute for Highway Safety built a mean new test. They take a car and smash just the front corner, only a quarter of the front end, into a hard wall at 40 miles an hour. Sounds super specific, right? But it copies one of the scariest crashes that happens in real life, when the corner of your car clips a tree, a pole, or another car coming the other way. In fact, about 40 out of every 100 of these wrecks are a single car hitting something fixed, like a tree or a pole, so it's really common. This test is way harder than a normal head-on crash. The big steel beams that are built to soak up a crash, called the frame rails, sit in the middle of the car. A corner hit slips right past them. So all that crushing force shoots straight into the cabin, into your feet, your legs, and the wheel gets shoved back at you. Cars that ace this test are about 12% less likely to kill the driver in a real crash, so it's basically life and death. But one SUV did something in this test that no car had ever done before. Now this is exactly why the Jeep Wrangler kept flipping. The Wrangler isn't built like a normal SUV, and that's totally on purpose. To climb over rocks and crawl through rivers, it sits up high on tall suspension. That means all its weight rides way up top, kind of like a tall kid balancing on a skateboard. It also sits on a short, narrow setup, so the wheels are pretty close together. Now stack a heavy body up high on a narrow base, and it tips over easier than almost anything else on four wheels. And the government already knew this. Back in 2020, the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration put the current Wrangler's rollover risk at around 26.7%, higher than just about every other SUV out there. But it gets scarier. Unlike most SUVs, the Wrangler has a roof and doors you can rip right off in minutes. It also skips side curtain airbags, the puffy ones that keep your body inside the car if it ever rolls. So when a Wrangler goes over, there's a lot less holding you in your seat. That makes a tip over way more dangerous than in a normal family car. And it gets worse when owners start changing stuff. Throw on a big lift kit and giant tires, and you push all that weight even higher, making it tip even easier. But nobody knew just how bad that problem really was until 2019, when the cameras started rolling. And that brings us to the 2019 Wrangler, the day it made history. When the current Wrangler came out for 2018, Jeep didn't have to crash a brand new one. Because the older Wrangler had already scored well, the safety lab let Jeep send in its own crash video instead. So Jeep ran the test, the Wrangler stayed on all four wheels, and the paperwork got mailed off. But the lab also does surprise checks to make sure those company tests are legit. So they pulled a 2019 four-door Wrangler off the line and crashed it themselves. And the second it hit that wall, it lifted up and rolled onto its side. They figured maybe it was a one-off, so they ran it a second time. It flipped all over again. Just like that, the Jeep Wrangler became the very first vehicle ever to tip over in this test. No car, no truck, no SUV had done it before. The Wrangler was the only one that climbed up and went over. Now the lab was honest about why it lost points. By the normal scoring, the Wrangler actually did great. The cage around the driver held strong, and the airbags fired off. But the lab can knock down a score for stuff that happens after the first hit, like a fuel leak, a door popping open, or in this case, the whole car flopping onto its side. You can't roll a car over and still call it safe, so the score got dropped to marginal. And Jeep was not happy about that one bit. But Jeep told a completely different story. Jeep pushed back hard. The company basically called the result a fluke, saying the crash didn't match how the Wrangler acts in the real world. And honestly, they had a point worth hearing. Jeep said it had built more than 870,000 of these Wranglers, and by their math, those trucks had driven over 13 billion miles. Out of all those miles and owners, Jeep said it couldn't find a single real wreck that looked anything like what happened in that lab. When the lab first got the flip, Jeep even argued about how they had strapped the Wrangler to the crash sled, hinting that caused it. So the lab ran it one more time, using a method Jeep's own engineers signed off on. The Wrangler flipped onto its side anyway, both times. So whatever Jeep believed about the real road, inside that lab, the result just wouldn't change. Most folks figured Jeep would quietly fix it and make the whole thing go away. But that's not what happened next. Quick pause. If you're thinking about buying a Jeep or you already own one, check out my 500,000-mile Jeep blueprint. It's packed with the reliability tips and owner secrets that can save you thousands. The link is in the description. Then came the 2022 Wrangler, and somehow it got worse. Behind the scenes, Stellantis, the company that owns Jeep, have been trying to kill that flip since 2019. They changed the Wrangler's structure and sent it back for round 2. So in 2022, the lab grabbed a fresh 4-door Wrangler and ran the exact same crash, and the Wrangler tipped onto its side yet again. The fixes hadn't done a thing. To make it sting even more, the test showed a real risk of injury to the driver's left leg and foot. The side airbag that's supposed to protect the head and chest didn't even pop open. At that point, the Wrangler had a title no car maker ever wants. It was the only vehicle to flip in this test since the lab started running it. Now let's compare that to the Wrangler's biggest rival. Ford brought back the Bronco swinging hard, and when they crashed a 2021 4-door Bronco in the same exact test, it stayed flat on all 4 wheels and earned a good rating. Same boxy off-roader, same kind of buyer, totally different result. And one weird detail most people miss is that the lab only ever crashed the 4-door versions of both trucks. The 2-door Wrangler and the 2-door Bronco never went through this test at all. So now Jeep wasn't just facing bad headlines. A direct rival was proving the problem could actually be solved. By this point, the Wrangler's flipping reputation was basically a joke. If you've ever hung around Jeep people, you already know the joke. Wrangler owners actually stick a decal on the bottom of their tailgate, printed upside down, that says, "If you can read this, flip me over." It's dark humor about rolling your Jeep out on the trail, and the Jeep crowd absolutely loves it. But that sticker stops being funny the day a crash test turns the joke into real news. And for a truck that sells in giant numbers, that's a serious problem. The Wrangler is America's best-selling truck-style SUV, the kind built on a tough steel frame. Jeep sold more than 150,000 of them in one recent year. Back in 2023, they even sold their 5 millionth Wrangler. So this wasn't some rare, weird machine sitting in a museum. This name goes way back, all the way to the Willys Jeeps from World War II, and the very first Wrangler that showed up in the mid-'80s. Millions of them are on the road right now, hauling families and sitting in driveways all over the country. So a safety black eye on a truck this popular doesn't just hurt the brand. It follows every single owner who already bought one. Jeep had every reason on earth to finally crack this thing. And for the 2026 model, they finally did. So this is the frame rail fix that finally worked. For 2026, Jeep went straight to the frame, the steel skeleton the whole truck is bolted onto. They added an extra chunk of steel to the front frame rail, and that one little change flipped the whole story around. Remember how a corner hit normally slides right past those frame rails and misses them? Well, Jeep turned that weak spot into a weapon. The company says the new piece works like a deflector. When the front wheel and tire get jammed in the crash, that beefed-up rail shoves the force off to the side, and the whole truck skids to the right instead of climbing up and rolling. So in March of 2026, the lab crashed a 2026 4-door Wrangler, and for the very first time in this test, it stayed upright. It slid sideways with every wheel planted, and there was no rollover at all. And to be fair, the lab didn't just take Jeep's word this time. The final score comes from 2 separate crashes, one run by the lab and one run by Stellantis, and the grade is built from both. So the same lab that roasted the Wrangler for years now says Jeep fixed what it called a long-standing issue with the popular SUV. That bumped the Wrangler's small overlap score from marginal to acceptable. After 2 embarrassing public failures and years of stubborn flips, Jeep had finally beaten the test. But before you start celebrating, there's a catch. But the 2026 Wrangler still has one ugly problem left. Acceptable isn't the top score. The best rating is good, and the Wrangler missed it for a reason that should make you stop and think. This crash test runs on both sides of the car, the driver's side and the passenger side. Your final grade is only as good as your worst side. On the passenger side, the 2026 Wrangler showed a high risk of injury to the front passenger's right foot and leg. So if your buddy is riding shotgun and the Wrangler takes a hard corner hit, their lower leg is in real danger. And there's a bigger reason the rollover scared people so much. The lab warns that flopping onto your side bumps up the chance someone gets thrown out of the car, partly or all the way. On a Jeep with doors you can pop right off in a parking lot, that getting thrown out risk climbs even higher. So because of that one weak spot on the passenger side, the Wrangler still can't win the lab's top safety pick award, the gold star prize that needs a good score on both sides. Either way, the rollover nightmare is finally over, and that's the giant one. But the Wrangler still isn't a perfect straight A safety student. It fixed the big scary problem while leaving a smaller one wide open. And the strange part is, Jeep didn't stop with just the Wrangler, and the Jeep Gladiator gets the exact same upgrade. The Gladiator is basically a Wrangler with a pickup bed bolted onto the back, so it shares the Wrangler's bones. And for years it shared the Wrangler's flipping problem too. So when Jeep built that beefed up frame rail, they slapped it onto the Gladiator as well. Same fix, same result. For 2026, the Gladiator climbs up to that same acceptable score. So in one move, Jeep cleaned up the safety record on two of its most famous vehicles at once. But there's one tiny detail in the fine print that matters more than almost anything else in this whole story. And it decides whether the Wrangler you buy is actually the safe one. Check one thing before you buy a 2026 Wrangler. The fix doesn't cover every single Wrangler wearing a 2026 badge. It only counts for Wranglers and Gladiators built after October of 2025. And that timing is everything. Two trucks can sit right next to each other on the same lot, both called 2026 models, but only the one built after that cutoff has the safer frame. So how do you tell them apart? There's a little sticker, usually on the driver's door or the frame right next to it, that shows the exact month the truck was built. So before you sign anything, go find that sticker and check the build date. If it was made after October of 2025, you're getting the safe, upright version. If it rolled off the line before that, you're looking at the older design, the one that still tips in the corner test. It's a tiny thing almost no buyer ever thinks to check. But on a truck with a history like this, that one little line on a sticker is the difference between the Wrangler that flips and the Wrangler that finally doesn't. So that's the real story of the Wrangler that finally stopped flipping. For almost this truck's entire life, the Jeep Wrangler carried a flaw it just couldn't shake off. It flipped when nothing else would. It flipped again even after Jeep tried to fix it, and its own rival sat right there, proving it didn't have to be that way. Then one extra chunk of steel, put in exactly the right spot, finally ended a problem that survived two very public failures. The Wrangler still has work left to do on that passenger side, and it's still a tall, narrow truck that you've got to respect behind the wheel. But the rollover that haunted it for years is finally gone. So that's the story of how Jeep finally fixed one of the Wrangler's biggest safety problems. Do you think Jeep got it right this time? Let me know in the comments below. If you enjoyed the video, give it a like and subscribe. And if you want to see another surprising Jeep story, click the video on your screen right now. I'll see you there.